Okay. So I have these instructions, just basic setup to get started in Slack. So I'm just going to go ahead and follow these. So you can go ahead and follow along. This lecture might be one you just want to like sit back and watch, instead of trying to follow along and just see how much you can absorb by watching. But if you like to type it out and follow along that way, that's fine too. So I'm just going to go through and, run these commands. So just go into your week 3 directory. And we're going to go back to creating our Rails app. Someone's slacking me. Let's see here. Did I forget something? I think Fabio's getting lost. Okay. Sorry, Fabio. Fabio's is losing his internet. So let's go ahead and run. Sorry, what was that?
Dave, can you do something when you go through something and you're done a command or something? Can you pause for a second so that way when we watch the recording we can stop just after you pause before you flip to something else?
I don't know what you mean by pause, because
like after you tell us something, or we do a new command or something, or a new section, just pause for a split second so that way when we watch the video we can actually pause the video before you start going on to the next step. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you.
So for this, we're going to run this command Rails new. Here's our name of the app. We're going to use Postgres and then this Webpack React just to get, this is how we're setting up React with our Rails app. So we don't need to do like the yarn create React app. This sets up React within our Rails app. So run that. Build out our Rails app. While this is running, it also split a new pane. Probably gonna want 2 of these anyway. And also the other thing I'm going to do while this is running, I'm going to create a repository for this lecture. All right. I forgot what I called this already. You don't need to do this part of creating a repository if you're following along. Do that later. Get this all ready to go with Git. Let's quickly do a Git add. Faster. Cool. So now you'll have this to reference. This will be where all the code's going to be for this lecture. Throw this up in Slack. Cool. So going to reference to that. There it is. Okay, so let's CD into our project. And yeah, I'm just going to follow these instructions that I have out in Slack, just kind of our general setup. There's one new one I have inside of here that we haven't seen yet before. It's the Rails G resource, item, name, category, description, likes, integer. So what we're going to do, we're going to build a vote application, and we're going to have one model. We're going to have this item model. Our item model is going to have a name, category, description, which are all going to be strings, and likes, which is going to be an integer. All this resource is doing, it's just going to create our model, an item model, and an items controller at the same time. So it's a tiny shortcut there.
So for the ones that you don't like say string, are you automatically assuming that they're a string?
Yeah, if we don't give it a type, it will default to a string.
Okay.
And yeah, see, that creates like a running this resource command that gives us our create items migration, our item model, gives us our items controller. So, and an item CSS. So it just is combining those two commands in one. The next command we can run is the bundle add React Rails. Once again, this is just, adding this gem. It's adding the React Rails gem to our gem file and installing it. Now we actually need to run a Rails command, Rails G React install, to kind of get this up and set up. That creates, that components folder where our components is going to live. It also creates this application JS and this server rendering JS, which helps to server-side render our React components. I'm also just right now going to create some files. Could do this in VS Code, but I'm just going to do this here. So I'm going to touch in my app JavaScript components. We're going to make an app.js file. I'm just going to close this so we can read that. And then I can hit up to get that last command, because I just also want a items controller, items JavaScript file. And while I'm here, I'm going to add Axios, yarn add Axios. Axios is a JavaScript package, or it's a node package. So this is going to add it to the package JSON, so then we can use this in our React components. So the next thing I'm going to do, open this up in code. And add some gems. So I'm just going to take these two gems from Slack and pop them in the group development test section. It's just our PryRails gem and our Faker gem. PryRails just gives us the ability to do binding.pry. Faker gives us the ability to use fakers so we can create some fake data. So once I've added those, I just need to install those so I can run bundle. See, that's now fetching Faker. Can go back, go to my seeds file. And I have this out in Slack. Just, we're just a way to create 10 items. So what I'm doing here is I have a categories array. So food, travel, miscellaneous. And then 10 times I create an item where I just use a faker for the name. I use a faker for the description. The categories I call a sample method. So it's just going to pick one of these strings. So that way, like, my category is going to be one of these three things. This is kind of nice because now I know I'm only going to have 3 categories. And then the likes, since that's an integer, I'm just using the counter here, the index. So 10 times do I. This I is going to be the counter of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that's what my likes are going to be. This gives me some variety with that. I could do something like this as well, like random 10. Pick a number 1 through 10 for my likes. But for this, I'll just use I. So I think now I could do a Rails DB create, DB migrate, and a DB seed. And I could just make sure that worked. Go right into my Rails console, do an item.all. And then there's my items. They have an ID, a random name. The category is going to be either like travel, miscellaneous, or food. And see how the likes start at 0. Just go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. But that's all I need. I just needed some fake data. So now I'm kind of set up with this. At least as far as like Rails, I have one model. I have some data in my database. So I'm kind of ready to start coding. Any questions on this setup part? Cool. So how I'm going to do this, I'm going to first build out our backend. We're going to do all of the Rails stuff first. I think we're more familiar with that. This should be like the easier part because we've been doing it for a couple of weeks. There's going to be some small differences here and there, but I think this is something that we can, get done kind of quick. I'm also going to just kind of, do a commit because I've done some, initial setup. Just kind of get all that stuff into my Git history. Cool. So yeah, let's start building out our backend. It's kind of been a couple days since we've done Rails, right? You already forgotten how to do this? I know, dude, I can forget stuff if I haven't done it in like 2 days or like a day. Wait, what do we do? So just remember, we have a items model, and then we're going to do we have an items controller as well. And we want to do some, let me just pull up this table, like Crud table Rails. I just want to pull up one of these tables. So we're going to do CRUD actions on items. So we're going to want to have these same paths, this is jobs right here. We're just going to, instead of jobs, it's going to be items. So we're going to want to do a get to items, and that should take us to our items index method. We're going to want to do a post to items and go to items/create. This one, actually, we're not going to do. The get jobs new or the items new, we're not going to do this because this method is responsible for returning a new form. We're not going to have our server return a form. We're going to just build in a form with our React component. So we don't need a route for this new method, and we don't need a route for the edit method because we're going to have React get our forms. Because we're also going to be doing a single page application. So none of these methods are going to be redirecting us to a new component. They're just going to be rendering JSON. So that's something that's going to be different that we haven't done yet. So let's go build this out. Let's first go to our routes file. I still could do resources. I could do this resources items. I mean, it's already there. If you notice, did the zoom things like right in my way. Resources items, that was put there because we did Rails G resource item. That's something else we get there. It does all of our routes for us. But let's write these out just to remind us. So it's like I said, it's been a couple days. So we're doing standard CRUD. We need to do our, I'm going to say this, we need to do standard CRUD actions, routes, except we don't need new or edit. So let's build these out. So we're going to do a get to /items. That should take us to our items controller, to the index method. Just refreshing your memory. Someone does a get request to items. That should take us to our items controller, to the index method. If someone gives us a get items and then passes us something else, or / something, that should take us to our show method. And this something, I'm calling it ID. That better be an ID of an items in our database. All right. Let's also do, so those are our shows. Let's do a post. Remember, that's a items. That's going to take us to our items controller, to the create method. To do a put request to /items. And then the ID of the item we want to update. That should go to our items update method. And there's also a match for patch, a patch request with the same route. And then we have a delete to items / the ID of the item we want to delete. That takes us to our items destroy. So these are going to be, these routes for this demo will all render JSON. I'm going to create one route up here that's going to be my root route. This is going to go to items. And then I'm going to create a function in there just called app. I could call this, home might be another one, but I'll just call this app. And this will be the only route that renders a component, i.e., HTML. So let's go ahead and now build this out. Any questions on these paths? These ones are like standard CRUD, or standard like API routes for a given model, except we don't have the new and edit because we don't need them. And then I have one root route that I'm going to do a custom route that goes to our items controller to an app method. So now we can go into our controller, items controller, and go build all these out. So we're going to have an app method. We're going to have an index method. We're going to have a show. We're going to have a create. We're going to have a update. def delete or destroy. Did I forget one? I think that's good. Okay. So these all render JSON. Let's render JSON. This will render our one, or like React will render a component. The SPA. So this is, we're creating a single page application. And what I mean by that, we're just going to be rendering back one HTML file. So we're only going to do one HTTP request to get back this one page. And then everything else, we're going to be working with JSON. So let's build out this app component and build out just the initial JavaScript React component that goes along with this. So we already made this file, this app.js. So let's just come along in here and build it out. Import React from React. It's the app. And export default. I'm just going to start simple here. Create this one component. Might just say single page application. All right. Maybe even give this just for fun some style. So if I want to do inline styling, I want to write JavaScript. So I do my first brackets. But then style wants a object. So I need to do pass. Now I pass in the JavaScript object. So that's why there's two brackets. The first one is because I'm writing JavaScript. The second one is the actual JavaScript object. And I'm just going to put in some border, 2 pixels solid, red, and margin. Actually, since this is our main container, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give this a max width of, I don't know, like 800 pixels. And margin auto. What this is going to do, just going to make this this page only be able to be 800 pixels wide, and then it's going to, this margin auto should center that. This might get a little messy. I could take this object, put this in a variable. I could create a variable called styles and just have that be an object. And inside of here, I can now start creating styles for this object. So now I can write this as styles.container. And then I can have my styles down here to keep my JSX clean. And then, I could come down here and add a style. Like if I wanted this to be styled different, this H1. Color green. And then here I could do style equal styles dot header. I'll slack this out. This can be another way we can do inline styling. We can just come in here, write style objects, and throw them in directly as an inline style. This is not quite CSS because, you know, CSS max width would be max dash width. So this is one of the another difference, you know, when we're writing JSX than just vanilla HTML. I can't do stuff like this max dash width. Why not? Because this is a JavaScript file. This now thinks that's a minus sign. So I have to do camel case. I have to put my values in strings. So I will slack this out. Slack. Cool. So there's just a basic app component. So now what I can do is in my controllers, this is where I want to render that component. So render component app. And so what I'm trying to, what I mean by this is going to render, this is the only component that's going to render any like HTML, and these are all going to render JSON. You know, previously we would do something like this, render components, and you know, we would go create like an items component. We're not going to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to render JSON. And I'm just going to say render JSON item.all. So grab me all my items and just render that directly. So let's look at the difference between these two. What's the difference between rendering a component and rendering JSON? So to do this, I'm going to start up my server, Rails S. And then I'm going to, you know, go to a browser, localhost 3000. There we go. There's my awesome app component with its lovely Christmas styling. So I go to localhost 3000. That goes, I have this path defined, this root route says, hey, if there's no, like, if it's just localhost 3000 with nothing else, take me to the items controller to the app method. All right, so then we go to our app method. That says render component app. So this is kind of following that whole MVC flow where, all right, well, let's go build out this app component, create the HTML, and then give it back to the client. So there's like all that HTML. We have another path that's kind of built out. We have a get to items. So if we do a get request to items that says, hey, go to the items controller to the index method and render JSON item.all. So if I go to localhost 3000 /items, that's just giving me raw data. It's not giving me any HTML or CSS. It's just giving me back, you know, this JSON. And, you know, this happens, this, you know, is a very quick call because it doesn't have to like build it doesn't have to go through and build out the HTML from the React component. It doesn't have to give us back all the CSS and all the links. You know, there can be maybe sometimes quite a bit when we get back this index.h, like our initial app. What is it? .html. Where's our index? So it's going to be application.html. When we send back a full HTML page, there can be a lot of stuff that we have to load. There can be all the CSS stuff, all the JavaScript stuff, any other links that we might be linking to. So that's why sometimes this localhost 3000, when we're rendering a component, that can take a second, especially if it's like the first time of the day since you've opened the browser, because that's like go get all that stuff. The localhost 3000/items, that just needs to get the JSON. So this is a much quicker call. So for this homework, or for this lecture and for the homework, we're always going to be staying on localhost 3000. Never in your URL should you go to like localhost 3000 items in your app. You can do it to like check to see that it's working. But we're going to just, for this homework, if you pay attention to this browser URL, it's always going to be localhost 3000. Never going to go to any other page. So that's what, does that kind of, is this single page application term making a little more sense? That's all this is the only page we're going to get back. So it's a single page. Cool. So let's go through now that we're here, and let's go ahead and just build out our controller. So I might want like a set item. And I might want to come here and do like a def set item method. Just like you normally would do. At item equals item dot find params ID. And then we could also do like a def item params. We're going to keep this the same. And then this is going to be item dot require. We're going to make sure we get that item key in our params, and then we're going to permit. What does our item have? I've already forgot. It has a name key. It has a category key. Category. Spell that right. We have a likes key. And I believe a description key. So we're going to use this for, our create and update method, just to sanitize our parameters. Our set item function, we can go ahead and do our before action. We'll set item. But we only want to do this on our show. Just all the methods where we're going to have an ID. So that's going to be the show, update, and destroy. So now for my show method, what I want to do is I just want to render JSON at item. So our show method, we set the item, and then we just give back that item. I could actually go test this one by going to localhost 3000/items/1. There we go. So now if I do a get request to item/1, that just gives me back that one item. Cool. So for my create method, what I want to do is here I need to make a variable. I need to reassign item to item dot new item params. And then we can try to save it. If item dot save results end. Let's we haven't talked too much about Rails validations. Let's do a quick Rails validation, just so we can kind of at least see. This is going to be like a bonus objective, so don't feel like you have to do this on your homework. But let's do a basic validation and kind of just talk about what a validation could be. So I'm going to go to my item model. Or sorry, item.rb. I'm going to add a validation. And how I can do this is I can use this validates. Validates. So let's just say I want to validate name. And what I'm going to do is validates the, I'll just do a very basic one, but a common one, to be the presence to be true. What this is saying is, hey, before you create an item to the database, make sure that the name is present. Make sure it's there. There needs to be like a valid, a name there. So we can do lots of validations. We could like check to see if it's a number. We could check to see if it's a number between 1 and 10. We can do all these validations to make sure the data we're getting is correct. We can maybe see if if it's like an email, we could check to see, hey, does this thing they sent me doesn't look like an email? So there's a lot of validations we can do. But for now, let's just keep this very simple with just we're going to validate one thing in our database, and that's the name. We're just going to make sure it's true. And just to show you this example now that I have that, if I split my pane, go into a Rails console, and do like I equals item dot create, that's saved to my database. Nope, because I don't have an ID. And if I do this variable I dot errors dot full messages, I get this. I get in an array back, and I'm getting this error as my first index. That name can't be blank. So then it's saved to the database, and it's telling me why the name can't be blank. So if I give it a name, now that did save to the database. Those other ones, since I didn't do any validation on them, those can be nil, but my name has to have a value. So there's validation 101. So back to my controller. So what this item.save is trying to do is it's trying to save this item to the database. So if this successfully saves, normally we would like redirect back to like our index method. But for this, any idea what I'm going to do here? I know I haven't even said this before, but if we successfully save, what do you think I want to give back? I think if you're like the front end person and you just created something, you're not going to get back a new HTML page. What do you think you want back?
JSON
Yeah, we want JSON. But what are we
for
going
the at item.
Yeah, I'm going to want the at item back. Because what is this going to have that the front end does not have right now?
ID.
Yeah, this is going to have the ID. And the front end probably wants that ID. And it's also going to have like the created at and updated timestamps. So this way, once you create something, it will create it to the database, save it to the database, but then give you back that created object back. Now this one, this create method, I really can't go to my browser and test. It's a little more, there are ways to do this, but we can't just do a post to items because by default, this is going to do a get request. So that's going to take me to my index method. So for now, I can't really test this without using another tool, which we're not going to do. So we'll just kind of assume this is working. So what I can do now, because this could potentially fail. If my front end doesn't give me a name, this is not going to successfully save. So what I could do is if this does not save, I could render JSON. And maybe I want to render like a hash. I'm going to do like errors. And as I just showed you in the console, I could do like, items dot errors. Maybe I want to do like the full messages. But I'm also going to change the status. 422. And we'll see what this does. But remember, so if this is successful, if we have a successful, we're kind of remembering our statuses. This will be status, 204. Remember 2XX, that means successful. And remember 4XX, that is a client error. And I'm giving a specific one here. 422 is a unprocessable entity error. Say that 422 is unprocessable entity. Like this is kind of like, bad data. What would cause this error to be thrown or this else to be rendered? I've kind of said it, but.
Don't give a name.
Yeah. If our client doesn't give us a name, it's not going to save to the database. So if they try to do a post request and they don't give us a name, well, I'm going to say, hey, that didn't work, because to save something to my database, you need to give me a name. And I can get back this message. So there's that. Let's do our update. Our update's going to be very similar to this, except I don't need to create this new item. I just need to take my at item and call the update method and pass the item params. So remember the update method, we have the at item defined because we do that in our before action. So we take the ID, we find the item, and then we call update. And then we try to update it. So once again, once we successfully update an item, we'll send it back. Just the updated item, we'll send that back. Here, just a side note, the ID shouldn't change. When you update something, the ID should be the same. But we'll just send it back anyway. Here you go, here's your item. And then we can also render JSON. Likewise, if they tried to update and they don't give us a name field, or they tried to update name to blank, this would fail.
Hey, James, you have messages misspelled. Do you need an extra S?
Oh, thank you. Messages. Yeah, this is kind of a bad way to, one of the reasons this is a bad way to do it is I'm writing a lot of code without testing it. So that's where those kind of errors can really start to creep in. So, but this is also just kind of showing like this is stuff we kind of know how to do. It's just a little different because instead of like redirecting and rendering a new page, we're just rendering JSON. But you see how like this is very similar to what you're doing last week as far as the Rails part of this. And then for our destroy method, we can just render, I mean, a couple options here. I could just do my at item dot destroy it. Now this method is going to return the item that was destroyed. So you know what, just to be nice, let's just render that back. So I'm going to destroy it from the database and then I'll give it back to the front end. Why would you maybe want to do this? There is one applicable use case to actually send back the item that was deleted.
In case you need to undo the delete.
Yeah, if they wanted, you could create a UI that like, you know, they delete something, but then you could give them the option, hey, do you want to undo that delete? And then if they clicked undo, then you just go recreate the item. So it would delete it from the database, but then if they clicked undo, you could just do another create request. So that's why, you know, you might want to, will generally send back the item you destroyed. We're not going to do that, but that's why I'm going to send that back. So I don't think, I didn't try to throw any bugs in here. There might be bugs in because I've really only tested these methods. I haven't tested our create, update, or destroy, but I think they're good. So now like our backend, the Rails backend part of this app is essentially done, minus if there's any bugs. So now the rest of this is kind of going to be all on the React side of things. And you're going to start to notice that the Rails doing stuff, the Rails side is the easy side. The React side's the harder side. It's going to take more time. I'm going to do a add and commit backend none. And what time is it? I think this is a good time for a break. Does anyone have any questions? Let me also push this up. Cool. So yeah, now when we get back, we can start working on the React side of things. And that's definitely going to be the harder part of this for sure.
I was following it along, but when I tested it broke. Do you want to push or Slack out all your controllers so I can see how it differs from the way I built them?
Yeah, so this is my only controller. So I'll Slack that out. Yeah, so if you want to take a break, come back at 10:40. If you want to stick around, I'm actually going to test my backend to see if it's working. if you want to watch how you can do that. And then this will be part of the recording. So you can do this later this weekend. So if you want to take a break, but if not, I'm going to show you how you can test your backend with this new JSON way. And like I said, you can watch this later through the recording. So what I have installed is, and that I'll show you in 1 second, is this app called Postman. Postman. So this is an app you can download. Oh wow, it's got 2 different chips. So I guess you have to figure out what chip you have. So if you have a new computer with the M1, you'll want to download this one. If you have an Intel chip, you'll want to download that one. But I already have this installed. So let me show you what this is doing. I'm going to dismiss this update. So what this allows you to do is do your HTTP requests with this UI. So you have to have your server running for this to work. But now I can hit up my server. So I could do like a local host. I'm just going to copy one of these. So I need to type in the full URL, which is HTTP localhost 3000. And I had like, let's just do a GET request to this. If I do a GET request to this, this is rendering all that HTML. So there's all like this is like my React page. It's the app page. So there's the HTML, has a whole bunch of JavaScript and CSS associated with this. But what I want to do is, test. I could test my /items path. I do a GET request, and now I can see my response. There's that JSON that it's rendering. I could do a specific one, a GET request to /items one, and there's my specific item. But the nice thing about this is now I can do I can switch this to a delete request. And so this will do a delete request to my server, which should delete my item with the ID 1. So I could send this. And is this an error? Okay. Yeah, so this is good because I did find an error. Now this error is kind of hard to read, but these requests are actually hitting my server. So I now probably know what this is going to be. If I scroll up, try to find the actual error. There we go. So this is something I forgot to do. I'm not sending a token. So my delete, post, and update methods are not going to work because it's going to be trying to validate this with a token, which I don't have. So I want to add that line of code in my application controller to ignore that. So let's go to my application controller. You'd think I would remember this because I have to do this all the time, but I always forget this. I think it's like protect. There it is, protect from forgery with null session. Just gonna copy this line. That's the one I want to throw in there. So that's just kind of saying, hey, don't worry about that token. Now with that there, I can resend this. So now that successfully deleted this item, because now I can switch this to a GET. And now that's failing because I've deleted that item with ID 1. And there's that error. Couldn't find item with ID 1. So yeah, now I can do like a post request. And I can actually, let's just do a post request to localhost 3000 items. I send that. This is going to fail. Once again, this is not the best error message. So I'm going to go to my server. Private method require. So what this is saying, private method require no method error. Oh, okay. So it's saying I don't have this method on my item class. So I go to my items controller. This isn't item.require. This is params.require. So what this is saying, my item method or my item model does not have a require method on it. Require called for item class because I had item here. So yeah, that's the wrong thing. I wanted to do params.require. Cool. Now I can send this again. Now, this is a little, so this sent back a ID with 12, a name, updated yo, and null. That is strange. I don't know where this updated yo is coming from. Completed true. I think this is from like a different API call. What? Okay. I might have some stuff that's getting saved in here. Oh wow, that's weird. Yeah, this is from another API call I was doing like weeks ago. It's weird that it's a really big coincidence this is working. So I'm going to get rid of this because this is the error you would have expected to see. I would expect to see this error. Param is missing or the value is empty. That was a weird coincidence that worked. Because if I do a post request to items, I need to actually send some data. And how I can do that with Postman is here. I can give it the key, I'm going to give it the model name, which is item, and then the attribute name. So we have a item with the attribute name that's required. And then I can give it the value. So this is like filling out your form in a weird way. We also have like an item likes category. Now these just happen to be here from like a previous session when I was using Postman. That's why I'm saying, that's why it's weird it worked, because it happened to be called item. And then I could do, for my likes, I could do like a 4. Send that. There we go. So my post is working. I can go and create an item. Item 1 has 4 likes. If I don't have a name, if I don't send this name, notice how my status, I get my 422 error, and then I get that JSON of errors name can't be blank. Because that time I didn't send the name, I just sent the likes. So with this, I have to send the likes. So this has an ID 15. So let's do ID 15. Let's do a put request. Changed. So I'm going to do a put request. This should update item 15. And there we go. You can see the name's been changed for item 15. And once again, like if I, with the validation, if I went and like deleted my name and sent that, that's going to fail. Because then I'm trying to update this item with a blank name. And that's not going to allow me to do that because of my validation. So I get that 422 unprocessable entity error. But if I do have a name, I get a 200 status, get that 200 OK status. Sorry, I messed up this error too. 204 is success with no content. So I'm going to switch that to be 200. Cool. So that's Postman. I know most of you are probably on break, but we'll talk about Postman more. But this is a good way that I can test my backend. I can test all my routes, my database, my controllers, my models, without having a front end. And that was nice because I actually found 2 bugs. We'll talk about those bugs as we come back. I'm also going to push those up. All right. I think it's time to get started. So yeah, if you took a break, I did a little demo on Postman, so you can rewatch that on the YouTube video if you want to learn more about that. But going through and testing with Postman, I actually did find 2 errors. So what we need to add to this before we move on to React to fix these 2 errors, first is we need to add, the protect from forgery with null session. This is just ignoring, token. So add this to your application controller. Because this, if we don't have this in here, it's going to prevent us from doing create, update, and delete. Those methods won't work. So throw that in Slack. The other error I found while I was testing in my items controller was in this method right here, my items param. I said item.require. It should be params.require. But other than that, using Postman, I now feel pretty confident in my controller and my backend because I went through, I tested all of these actions. They were all seemed to work, doing what they're supposed to be doing. So let's go ahead and now get to the more challenging part of this lecture, and that's doing all this stuff on React. So here's our app.js. This is our single page application. What I'm going to do here, just to kind of, help clean this up, kind of give us some practice creating components, is I'm going to create a new file in here. Oh wait, I already have items. Well, since I'm here, I'm going to create a file called item.js. So I'm going to have an items file, an items React component, and then an item singular. Let's go to our items.js and just stub this one out really quick. Props. Return div from items. Style equals. I do just want to give these some. Let's just do this here. Kind of do it the same way. Get some inline styling practice. Styles.container. Come down here, create that styles object. It's just a JavaScript object of nested objects. So I'm going to have a container object in here. And this is where I can put the styles or this container. Like I want a border. 1 pixel solid. Let's do green. Let's do some margin. Pixels and some padding. Here I can just export default items.
I don't know if it matters, but I know that you spelled container wrong, James. It's like future reference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that matter?
I don't think so in this one since they're both named the same.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's a yes and no. Like no, it's not going to break my code. But yes, because it is misspelled. So it's not going to break my code, but I should fix it. Did I do that in my app.js too? The reason why, like, because then maybe container, like if it's spelled differently in different spots and it still works, it just, in the end of the day, it's going to make for messy code. Spelling errors can, they're not going to break your code, but they can make it harder to read. So thanks for bringing that up, because I should try to spell my code right. All right, so now I have this items component. And now my app component, I can just render that component. Now I'm going to use VS Code, the auto import. I'm going to get here. I'm going to, once that starts to complete, I'm going to just hit tab. Just a nice little shortcut to import that for me automatically. And there we go. Now my app component is rendering this items. Let's see here. I'm going to make this. So now I should be able to go to localhost 3000. And now see this component page. This is just going to help. I like doing these borders just because it kind of helps shows me where my components are. Remember how like React is kind of like Legos. It's these smaller components building these bigger components. It helps illustrate that. Let's also do this today. Let's do a React, go Google like React Chrome extension. So there's a lot of these extensions, developer tools that are going to help you as a developer. There's a lot of Chrome. One of the reasons we use Chrome in this class is because Chrome has a lot of these extensions that we can add to Chrome to help to give us some like developer tools. One of these is the React extension. I already have this installed, but what you can do is, install this into Chrome. right? I don't know. Does it say install or add or something? So go ahead and add that. And then what this is going to do. So now I have this React app. When I inspect, in this tab bar here, there's a lot of different things here. I want to go find the one that says components. So now I can view this. I can view my app and I can view their components. And we can see props. Once we get state, it will show the state. But this can become a very nice debugging tool, and I can go in and look at like what my components look like. And see how it's like I hover over my app, it's highlighting my web browser. Here's your app section. Oh, there's your items section, the items component. So now we have like the component section and the console and the elements. So these all show different things that can be very useful. Maybe look a little at the network. The network's going to be useful when we're doing like Axios calls. This is going to show the Axios calls the API calls we're doing. So these tools all can help us, debug and see what's going on. I think I'm going to veer off. Well, no, okay. We'll do it like this. Now, I don't have to make this items component. I could have done all of this stuff. I could have just done this here, but what I'm trying to do is, separate some of this logic and put it into their own components, into their own files. Just to help clean this up. I think this might make it a little more confusing at the start when you're learning how to use props and keep this global state. But this is a better way to do it because now my components are cleaner. So what I want to have is, and I'm just going to leave this as a note, is my items state is going to live in my app component. I know I have an items component, but the item state is going to live in my app component. Why is it going to live here? Well, I'm also going to, and we can do this really quick. Let's just create a new component. I'm going to call this item form.js. And I'm just going to copy what I have for my items and paste that inside of here. Change this to like item form, and then maybe change the border color. Because in my app component, I'm going to have like an items component, and then I'm going to have like this item form component. So my item state's going to live here. And if I can just pass it to my items component as props. But let's see what this looks like. So I import my item form from item form. Now it's rendering in my app component. So now I need to refresh. So there's my items component and my item form component. Maybe I want this one above my items. So notice every time I make a change, I have to refresh because I have to do a new HTTP request to get these changes. yesterday when you're just using the React app, you didn't have to refresh 'cause the React app was just doing some stuff for you. But since this is our Rails app is server side rendering our React component, every time I make a change to my front end, I need to hit refresh to go grab those changes. Cool. Let's do, before we even start doing the logic, let's do a little review of use state. Because let's say I want to be able to toggle this item form component. I want to be able to show and hide it. So what I'm going to want to have is I'm going to want to have some state, some show new form or show form. We'll just call it show form. Actually, I'm going to call this show new form just to be very explicit. Set show new form. Use state false. I'm just kind of making this choice like, you know, by default, I want to have this, I want to be able to have my item form here to create a new item, but I don't want to see it by default because I just by default want to see my items, but I want to have like a button that I can press that's going to toggle this form. So let's do that. So I could have now in here, I could have a button. Let's just say toggle for now. And this is going to have a on click. And I'll do this in a function. Let's just say, call this function toggle new form. Const toggle new form. So when this button is clicked, all I want to do is set my show new form to be the opposite value of what it currently is. So I negate, I do a not and negate that value. And then here, I can use this state, the show new form. If this is true, then I want to render my item form. If it's not true, I'm not going to show it. So I have a button that when I click it, it just toggles this Boolean. It's just toggling this Boolean to true and false. So if this is true, we're going to show the form. If this is false, we don't show the form. Refresh those changes. So now I have this toggle button. Maybe I don't want that to say toggle. Maybe I want the message to be a little more user-friendly. So what I could do is I could use a ternary here. If this is true, maybe I want to have like a hide button. If it's false, I want to say like new. Or maybe I could have like a cancel, or like new item. So that if my show new form is true, that means it's showing. So I want this to say cancel because that would, clicking on that would toggle it back to false. If this is false, that means my form is hiding. So I'd want to show like new item. So if I refresh, see now it says new item. If I click on it, it now says cancel. And that's a way I could toggle that form. but I'm also toggling the value of my button. Cool. So there we have a new form. So let's start building out this form. Form. For now, I'm just going to stick with, because I know we have a lot of attributes, but for now, I'm just to keep this simple. We just have a name attribute right now. Let's just stick with that. And then we'll kind of add the other ones later. But we're going to also do something else with this form. We're going to have this item form handle both our new and update. So we're going to just create one component that's going to be able to do both, be used for both our update and both our new. And this is different than how we did it last week, where we created two separate forms. But this is going to be a better way to do it because we're going to, a lot of our code was repetitive. So with this way, we're going to reuse a lot of our code. But it's going to be a little more tricky because now we have to kind of make it dynamic to be able to handle new and update. Like this should either say new or update versus, if it's a new form or an update form. So let's just refresh that. So new item. So yeah, now it's saying new update. Now this is my new form. And here's the trick I'm going to use to see if this is a new or an update method. Is this a new form or an update form? What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull ID from props. And then here, I'm going to see if I have an ID. If I have an ID, if this component gets a prop ID, an ID prop, I know this is going to be an edit form, right? Because it actually has an ID to edit. That's an ID of an item. That means it exists in the database. So I'm updating it. If this form does not get an ID, that means it doesn't exist. So that's going to be a new one. And likewise, I could do that down here for my button. I could say like, if I do have an ID, I'm going to say like update. If I don't, I'm going to say create. Now I refresh. Get my new item. Now this says new item form. It says create. Does that make sense? Because if I'm creating a new item, there's not going to be a new ID. Let's keep, I think that's, so let's kind of, let me slack out this form here. And then we'll kind of get away from that and go back to maybe getting all of our items. Just kind of doing some basic, or not basic, but like just kind of setting up kind of the structure of this. So let's go. What we want to do here is, and let's go ahead and do this as a button. So normally how I might want to do this is with a use effect. Just to review the use effect, we could do a const or come up here in our app, because this is where our item state is going to live. We could do our use effect. Remember, the use effect takes a function, a callback function as the first argument. And then for now, we're just always going to use this empty array as the second argument to, run callback on mount. So when this component mounts, we're going to run this callback. What are we going to do here? We're going to create a function called get items. I need to define this function, get items. This is going to do our Axios call. So this needs to be an asynchronous function. So const get items, that's an async function where we are now going to do our let response equal await. Now here's where we're going to do our get request, our axios.get /items. Now, really, this is going to like localhost, 3000. Like it's going to prepend the website. If we don't prepend that, it's just going to use the one we're already using, which is going to be our localhost 3000. So we can just use get items, and then let's console.log response.data. So our component mounts. Once it mounts, we run this get items call. We get our items. We use async await syntax. So we do our Axios call. We await for Axios to get our items. Once it does, it's going to put it into this response variable, and then we're just going to log response.data. So now if I hit refresh, go to my console. There we go. My response.data, there's the log response.data. There's my array of objects. That's like me going to localhost 3000 /items. There's the array of objects. But remember, I don't want to do that in my browser. I'm going to use Axios to do that. So now I want some item state, const items, and a way to set that state, set items equals use state. I'm going to make that be an empty array. And then once this, instead of console.logging my response.data, I can still throw that in there or comment that out just if I want to have that to check. But really what I want to do is I want to set my items to response.data. So I'm not going to render, I'm not going to do the mapping or the rendering of my items in this app component. I've created this items component to do that for me. So this items component, its job is to go through the items and render them. So how am I going to give this items component this item state? Via props. So I'm going to create a prop called items, and I'm going to set it equal to items. This is where we're really going to start overloading terms. But this is the correct way to write this. So let's look at line 32 in detail. And we have 3 items. We're using the word item 3 times. But they are 3 different things. What is this capital I items? What is that referring to?
Items component.
Yeah, that is the React component. That is this component. What is this items in the middle here?
That's kind of like the variable name you're passing the props.
Yeah, this is going to be the name of the prop. So I call this items. Now inside of here, I'm going to have props. So I could do like a destructuring const items from props. If in my app.js, I called this X, then in my items component, I would have on props, I would have an X key. But I'm going to stick with some good convention and call that items. What is this items right here?
That's the items array created by the uState.
That is that's the state items. That's the value. That's going to be the array of objects here. So the capital I items, that's the name of the component. This items equals, that's the name of the prop. And then the items inside of here, that's the value. And in this case, items here is my state, my item state. Let's refresh this. And let's go look at our components. So I'm on my app component. My app has some state. It has this false state. If I can come in here and just change this to true. If I change that to true, now my new item form is showing. So that's that show form state. And I can see this change as I click change my UI. I also see this other state. There's my array of objects. So that's my item state. If I click on my items component, now this has props. This has items props, which is my array of items. Because my app component does the Axios call to get the items, and then it sets that state items to be that array, and then it passes the items component, that item state as props, which it calls items. So this has props.items. Where in my app component, there's items state. I know it gets super confusing how we're just overloading this items term. And this is where like it starts to happen where you're like spelling items and you like don't even recognize it anymore because it's in this file. Like how many times is items inside of here? It's in here like 12 times. It's not even that big of a file. So I think it's something else you can do to maybe, if you're struggling with this, is give these bad names. Like if I set this to X, I can still call this set items, but then I would need to switch that to X. So that's a way I think, you know, you can kind of go in and like quiz yourself, try to see what's going on here, is by playing like the change name game. But that still should work the same. Cool. So let's keep going. So now my items component is receiving this items prop, which is.
Could you slack out your app as it is right now?
Yeah. So let me select that out. So what I'm going to do now
Can
is
you also push to GitHub? Sorry.
yeah, I can push this to GitHub. Git add, git commit -m. That's a bad message, but whatever. Origin master. Good time to commit though, because I kind of have this in a working state. So now this items component is getting this items props. And really what this is just going to do, this is just going to essentially render over my items. Items dot map. And I'm going to do this inside of here. I'm just going to write this items dot map inside of here. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each item. And I'm going to use this item component. Let's just for now give it the name. Item dot name. So I could come in here and just write the JSX here, like, you know, the div, whatever my item looks like. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all that and I'm going to do that in this new component called item. You know, this is going to help keep my component small and reusable and only do one thing, which is going to make my code cleaner. So I'm just going to go ahead and, well, let's just type this out. So I'm now going to define this item. So let's import React from React const item. It's going to take props, return. And this is where I can just do the HTML for one item. And for now, I did pass a name prop. So I could destructure that here, const name from props. Item, or let's just do name. Export default item. I'll just select this out too. But yeah, what I'm trying to do or say here is I could have in my items, I could do it like this as well. I mean, that's essentially all I'm doing right now, right? All my item.name is doing is it's just returning this JSX. So why go through all that effort of creating an item component to do that? When I could just do it like right here. Well, this item component, I'll tell you, this item component is going to get a lot more complicated probably. And then this code right here would get a little messier. Really, all I want this items component to do is just go through my items and render them out. And then I can have my item component be responsible for rendering one item. This is just going to help me clean up my code. I refresh. Oh, my server's like stalled. It looks like I have an error. So now when you start running into errors, these errors are going to be a lot less friendly when you're working with just Rails. So this is where you need to definitely become more of a detective. So a couple tools you're going to want to use is your inspect element. I'm going to tell the TAs, if you come into the TAs and you say, I have a problem and you don't have your console open, I'm just going to have them send you back. You need to be developing with your console open because you need to start reading these errors. A lot of times you'll have warnings. And the warnings you don't have to worry about. And these can be hard to read. I'm not expecting you to know how to read these errors. I just want you to be attempting. But if you come to a TA and you're like, my app's not rendering, why not? And you don't even have this open, then we'll send you back and tell you to look at your errors. Because there's two places I'm going to want to look, because right here I'm getting an error. There's a good error right there. Item is not defined. I could also check my Rails server. In this case, there's not going to be an error here. This is the error I'm looking for. Item is not defined. Now, if you don't know what that means, that's fine. But at least you looked at it, you saw it. And then there you could be like, I got this error, item's not defined. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. But any ideas on what might be causing that? It's even telling me where it is, items.js line 8.
Did you forget to import the item.js?
Yeah, so I'm using, notice how it's line 8, so it's not exactly giving me exactly where it is, but it's pretty close because it's line 9. And yeah, and even right here, I saw it in VS Code. There's 3 dots right there. Could not find item. Did I mean item? No, I didn't, but at least it's kind of pointing out there's a problem. So yeah, I forgot to import this. So import item from item. Now I refresh. And there I go. Now see, here's an example of a warning. This one is not going you'll see this warning quite a bit. This is not going to break it. See, I can see that this is working. Items, there's all my items, but I do have this warning. What this is saying is each child in a list should have a unique key prop. So I'm creating a list of items right here in my map function. So it's saying, hey, they should have a unique key. So I'm going to add a key prop. I'm going to call this item dot, and I'm going to give it the ID because that is unique. Now, if I refresh, those should be gone. Cool. But having this open, now I can, that's going to help you find those errors. And another place you might be able to find your errors is going to be in your Rails server. Cool. I'm going to copy this styles object in my items. I just want to give my items some style. Let's make this orange or blue, whatever, it doesn't really matter. Just want to show these components visually. Styles.container. I think it just helps to do some basic UI stuff. Border our components so we can see them in our UI. So there's all my item components. I could also go check my components tool. What happened to this? Is that not working anymore? Components. I don't know why this is not. Okay, I guess I had to do a full like refresh. You can do a Command R to refresh your page, but sometimes if you do a Command Shift R, that's like a hard refresh. It's going to like clear your cache. I guess that fixed it. But now I can see here, I have my app, I have my items component, and then I have my individual item. And this is nice because now I can go view my individual items and I can go view their individual props. Because I'm giving these all a name prop. And they're all different. And then I can see the key that I'm giving it. Cool. So let's keep building this out. We also have a description, right? Or let's do a likes item dot likes. And then in my item.js, now I could pull off likes because I'm getting that prop. Make that like a paragraph. I don't really care how this looks, but I could get likes. And just refresh this. But now I'm passing down. Oop, I'm not seeing my likes. So this is where I could use this tool. Why is that not reloading? Okay, so when I look at this app items, see now I can look, see I can see my props. I am getting a like prop, which is 1, but I'm trying to call this likes. Oh, but see here what I did here. I named my prop like. So that's why it's called like. I want that to actually be called likes. So I can use this tool. That might have been a hard one to find. But since I'm using, once you get a little better at using these tools, you'll find these really do help. And now likes is there. I don't know why this is making me refresh so much to see this. But this is a nice way because I can go in and I can view my state. I can view props. And then I can kind of confirm that to, is this matching my UI or not? Now I can keep doing this like description equals item dot description. But I'm going to show you a little shortcut. So this item is a object, right? It's just a JavaScript object that is going to look, am I logging it? Right, this item is just an object that has like ID, likes, name, description, category. So I'd have to do that for all of this. You know, category equals item dot category. There is a quicker way to do this, a cleaner way, is if this is an object, what I can do is I can just spread out over that object. I still need to give it this key prop because React needs that. But what this is going to do, this dot 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 item, this is going to fill out all of the key value pairs for this object. So what I can do is just refresh this. Look at this components. See how now each item is getting the category prop created at, description, ID, likes, name, updated at. So it's just that ... items is just a quicker, cleaner way than manually going through each of your key value pairs and doing this. So now I'm getting like, ID, I'm getting category, and I'm getting description. I'm getting some other stuff, but for now, this is all I really care about. And I'm not going to try to make this look good or anything. I'm just going to throw these out so I can see them. Category, category, description. See how this item component's just slowly growing? So it's kind of nice in my items component. This code is still remaining clean. And it's my item component that's growing and getting more complicated. So this is helping keep my code clean. Cool. And there we go. So we have a new item. So we can toggle our form. We get all of our items. And then we show each, then we loop through them and display them all. So I would say that is kind of, I could do a commit. I would say that was like our index or like our, show all items. That's like our, one of our CRUD actions. We're showing all of our items. Cool. So let's go ahead and we have a good start on our new. We have our form kind of set up. So let's go ahead and start working on this. So a couple things we want to do. Let's do an onSubmit function. Let's call this handle submit. Let's go ahead and define that const handle submit. Remember this function, we can take the event, and what we're always going to want to do is we're going to want to, with these React ways and like API way of creating something, we're going to want to prevent the default. E.prevent default. And this prevents a reload. Cool. And then we're also going to want for our inputs, we're going to want, now for all of our inputs, we're going to want state. So I can go ahead and grab our use state hook. And just kind of follow this flow of, we're going to have some name state for our form. Use state. We'll just set that to an empty string. So this one, the value is going to equal name, and then the onChange is going to equal our function. Now this is just kind of always going to be like this, where we take the event and then we can set name to be our e.target.value. And then here I could like console.log. We'll start building out our object that we're going to use to create this item. Cool. So a couple things, we've just added a value for our input, and then the onChange handler, and then the onSubmit handler for our form, which prevents us reloading, and then we're just logging out our state. So I need to refresh this to get those changes on here. new item. Once again, throw up my inspector so I can see this log. Item 1. Create. So now I'm creating this object with the name key and item 1. Likewise, let's just maybe add likes. So if I wanted to add likes to this form, switch that to likes, go in, create some state, likes, set likes. This value would be likes. This could be set likes. So very, very similar. And then also I could start building out this object likes. Well, I'm not going to worry about this like not being a number right now or a number field. We'll just kind of just build it out so I could have a name here, likes 1, hit create. See, I'm able to type into my inputs. When I hit create, I'm just logging the object that I'm going to want to send to the database. All right. So let's do our handle submit. So what I'm going to do here is let's go ahead and just do our Axios call here. Axios call here. And we can just do this. So I'm going to do my Axios call. So let response equal Axios. So I need to import Axios. Now this is going to be a create method. So I want this to hit my create method. So I'm going to do a post request to/items. Now this is something new. We haven't done a post request yet, so let's kind of go through this. So I'm building out this form, I'm building out this object. I do a post request to items with Axios. That should hit my create method in my controller that we did earlier today. And this is also going to be a Axios. So if I'm doing an Axios call, I need to make my function async. And I need to use the await keyword. This might, this is a asynchronous call. So let's go ahead and try this. I need to refresh to get these changes. Go ahead, new item. And do a name here, likes 1. I'm going to hit create. So nice thing here, I have my inspector open so I can already see this error. I'm getting a 400 error. Now, this is a nice error, but it's really not that useful. It's kind of like a generic 400 error. There's a problem with the client request. But it at least lets me know there's an error. But if I really want to see what's going on, like why did this fail, I want to check out my server. Because this is where, the better error is going to be. And there it is right there. Param is missing or the value is empty item. And this is coming from it's kind of actually showing me, this is what's called the stack. It's kind of showing me like the stack of where this fell. So it hit the create method, which the create method calls my item params method. So it's actually failing in my item params. So something I could do, I could put a binding.pry in my item params method or in my create method and see what's happening. But this is kind of telling me what's happening. Param is missing or the value is empty item. What that is saying is like if I go back to my items controller, remember how we have this sanitizer params not require item? I'm not getting that item. I could put in a binding.pry here just so we could see. Now, since this is in my server, I actually don't have to refresh. I could just hit create. And now I'm in my pry. I could look at params, controller items, actions. So I do not have a params item. That's nil. So I obviously don't have a params item like name. So that's why this is failing. It's not passing my validation of requiring item. But that makes a lot of sense actually, because if I look at my item form, I'm doing a post request. This is creating something to the database, right? How's this going to work? Like I'm not even sending my information from the form here. For this to work, I actually need to send that information. So let's start building out our item object. So we're logging it right here, but we're not actually doing anything with it. So let's store that to a variable. And what we can do is that in our second argument to our post request, because the post request, it's unlike the get request, we actually need to send some data along with it. So let's send our item object that we're creating right here. And actually, let me go back to my items. I'm going to refresh this to get that change. I'm going to go back to my items controller, put in my binding.pry back in so we can see it. So now, since in my item form, I'm sending that item, I go ahead and create a new item. I'm now in my pry. I can actually even, I really don't even need a pry because I can now see it inside of here. There's my parameters. See, I have an item param that has the name and likes. So I can do params : item. Boom, now that's there. So that's the params.require item. And then I can do like a grab the name off of that. So now that has that items param and it has the information to create the item. I'm going to hit exit. So that, if I go back, I'm going to get rid of this pry. So now if I go back to my web browser, because I'm logging the response. So remember in our create method, after we successfully create something, we're going to render back the thing we just created. So my response.data, there is our newly created item. And I know it's been created to my database because it now has an ID, it has that created at and updated at. So let's go back to that item form. So response.data is my item, is the item I just created to the database. So remember yesterday we had this to do of like creating to database, create, or like save to database. Boom. So that is actually now done. Done. Now, next, what we want to do is we need to update UI. i.e. we need to add response.data to items. Where does our state live for our items? It lives in the app. So we're actually going to make this function here, const add item. This is going to take an item. And this is going to call our set items function, where we add that item and and spread out over the rest of the items. Right? That's how we add it to our UI. We just add the item to our array, copy all the old ones, and then we reset our items array to be that new array with the added item. So now this add items function, I'm going to pass to my, I want to pass it here. I'm going to pass it to my item form. Once again, I'm overloading this add item name, but this is going to be the way I like to do it. The name of the prop is called add item. That's this value, this orange value here. This blue value add item is the actual function. So in my on my item form component, I now have props.add item, which is going to be this function, which is also called add item. So now what I can do is update my UI. I can do a props.add item response.data. Why am I doing, so I could do props.add item, or since I'm destructuring up here, why don't I just pull that off of props? Both would work. I could either destructure add item off of props here, or I could say props.add item. Let's do the same thing. Let's refresh. We're going to do a new item. New yo. Let's do one. Let's create. New yo. There's has one like, and there it is. It's in my UI. I know it created saved to the database because it now has an ID. I could also check to see if it saves to the database by refreshing. And there it is at the bottom. There's my create. This would be a good time to do a git add, git commit -m. Questions on this? What time is it? It's 11:50. Let's take a break. I do want to get through update. So let's take like a 10-minute break. Let's come back at 12 and then we'll start working on update. But are there any questions? I can stick around if there's any questions. This should also be up on, these recent changes will be up on GitHub. All right. Let's get started. Cool. So yeah, let's do update. Update is a little more challenging. There's a lot of ways we could try to do update, especially from the UI. I mean, our backend should technically be done, but from the UI, you know, you could maybe have like a separate form where our new form is, but how, or we could have like a modal pop up or something like that. I think what I'm going to do this time is just with each of our item components, I'm going to throw in a form that updates that specific item. So they're each going to have their own individual form. You know, maybe we could add a toggler to it to make it look a little more nice, but for now, all of my item components are just going to have a form. So to do that in my item component, I'm just going to have them all have a form. Maybe I'll do like a horizontal rule or something to create a line. Now if I refresh, they all have a form. Now it's saying new item form and it's saying create. Also, these ones should be populated. The update form should be populated with the values of the form, since this is an update form. So I could do something like this. Remember, let's first try our ID. Remember, if we have an ID, that's kind of the one way we're determining if our form is an update form. And we have that logic already, where we pull the ID from props. If we have an ID, it should say edit item form. So just by giving this an ID, because now we're in the item component and an item does have an ID right there. So we can pass that as a prop. Let's hit refresh. Now our form says edit item form. And our button says update. Because now we're passing this form an ID. In our form where we create a new item that's responsible for creating a new item, you know, we obviously do not pass this item an ID because it does not exist. So that one does not get that prop. Our item does. Could also just give this, you know, name prop. Set that equal to name. Do the same thing with likes, set that equal to likes. Do that for each of my categories. But remember, props is just this object. I could also do this like this. Because props is actually for my item. I'm just passing down name, likes, ID, categories, descriptions. So either one of these would work. This one's just a little cleaner. This might be a little harder to understand what's going on when I do ... props. I'm just saying, hey, give all the props that was given to me to this item controller and pass them on down to the form. So these are both going to do the same thing. Just kind of, you can choose which one you use, which one's maybe easier to read. But notice how they both said edit item, because they're both getting in an ID. So maybe I'll just comment that one out, leave a note. This is another way to pass down all props. See, because this is going to start getting long, so I'm going to want to pass down the description. So we could do it like that, or a lot cleaner like that. But we'll do like this for now. Cool. So now our form here, it's getting, not only is it getting an ID, but it's getting the name, likes, categories, and descriptions that we already have right here. So now all I need to do is go put those values and put them inside of my, and you have them be the initial state. Right, because now we're getting like should be getting a name. We should be getting, let's just stick with name and likes for now. I'm going to go ahead and hit refresh. Inspect my element. And it blows up. All right. Let's see, that's a weird error. Let's see, I'm just gonna, because I think all I changed was that. I believe I'm gonna refresh. And that is an ugly error. Okay, so I'll put those back in. So this is what's actually breaking my code, is just by throwing name and likes inside of here. And unfortunately, this is giving us a bad error. I'm not seeing the cause of this in here. Oh, that is, yeah. This error will get friendly once we separate friendlier once we separate React from Rails, but yeah, this one's a challenging one. And you know, when I told you that error messages can be your best friends because they tell you what's going wrong, this really doesn't give us a lot of information that's going on. So if you ever get to an error message that you don't understand or isn't giving you a lot of information, one way to debug is to get your app back to a working state. So I know if I remove these two lines, this name and likes, and I refresh, it works. But if I put those back, it breaks. And this error message does not say at all why that's causing it. This is a pretty generic error. Let's just say, hey, this broke when pre-rendering app. So this is really not useful. But what was useful was I know the change that breaks it. So adding name and likes breaks this. Any idea why that breaks it?
Does it make a difference if you just get rid of likes and see? I mean, obviously both break it, but my thinking is just go back one step at a time and see exactly what breaks it.
Oh yeah, perfect. Let's do that. Let's just do likes. So I'm going to get rid of likes and not names. Yeah, that's still broken.
Is it because you already have name and likes set as a variable?
Yeah, and that's the reason. So yeah, if I would have gone through and done what Mike said, which I think is a good idea, to just like I could have even broken that up smaller, and tried that out. But yeah, what the issue is I'm declaring, these are right with these lines of code 5 through 6, I'm declaring variables. I'm declaring a variable called name and set name. I'm declaring a variable called likes and set likes. I'm declaring a variable but then I'm redeclaring these name and likes variables. So I can't do that. I can't, this is part of the rule with const, I can't have two variables with the same name. And this, this should be an error that should be picked up. Like, you have name defined twice, but it's something that doesn't get picked up, but that is the error. So I have some options here. Look, and this is kind of a good quiz. Can I rename this name? Can I change the name of this name and likes? Let's go with likes. Can I rename likes here on line 7? Could I call this X? Like, is that going to work?
Not really there because it's defined in the array that you get through props. But you could probably like define another variable and then equal that to props dot likes.
Yeah, so I can't do that because here I'm destructuring and I have to match the name of the key. So that has to be exactly likes because I'm getting likes from props in my form. Likes. I could change that to X. And then I could change that to X. Then that would work, but that's bad. I don't want to do stuff like that. I want to keep these names the same. I want these to be what they are. If I start naming this X, like, then what the hell is that? Like, this is the likes. So yeah, I could do something like this. I could do like maybe const initial likes is props dot likes. I could do something like that. I could give it a different name. Initial likes is props dot likes, and same thing like that, because that's really what this is. Because I'm in my form, and this is going to be like my initial value, props dot name. So that could be another way I could do that. There's another way I can do this where I'm kind of doing the same thing, but I can do it still with destructuring. So I can pull off the likes. So this has to match, but then I can do a colon and then I can rename the variable. So this is essentially doing what Mike suggested, coming down here, creating a new variable name, setting it equal to props.likes. This is the way I can do this with destructuring, is I still have to match the key, but then I can rename it. So if I do a colon, I can rename the variable. Refresh. See if we can get rid of this error. Cool. So now I have this initial likes, and I'm actually going to throw this up above right here. Because now what I can do, because in my use state, remember, this is the value of my initial value, right? If I set this value to initial value, I'm spelling this wrong, but can I refresh? This is going to be the initial value of my name state, which I'm using in my input right here. So if I look at my forms, this is going to be the initial value, Well, I don't want my new form to have that because that should just be blank, but I do want my edit forms to have the initial value of whatever the name is. So here's what I'm going to do. Another ternary I'm going to see, hey, do I have initial name? Is that defined? Meaning, because I'm only going to get this if it's edit. If I do have it, then use it. If I don't, meaning it's like the new page or the new form, use an empty string. Same thing, I can do the same thing with likes. Do I have initial likes? If I do, use it. If I don't, use the empty string. Because remember, my new form is not going to get an ID. It's not going to get a likes. It's not going to get a name. But my edit form is going to get all these props because they exist. So get the likes, get the name, rename them so we don't overload, so we don't have two variables with the same name. Check to see if we have them. If we do have them, use that value as our initial state. If we don't have them, just use an empty string. So now when I refresh, I click my new item, no default values because they're not passed to that form. But my edit form has the initial values that match what it actually is. So the name is RAM. There we go, name RAM. But then I can go in and also update these as well. But now we're all of this code in our form. Now we can reuse this code. It's definitely more complicated, but now our form is more reusable. We can use it for both update and create. Just have to add some logic to handle that. All right, the next thing we need to do is our submit or update. Well, our submit is already handling it's already handling our create. Well, what I can do is, once again, I can do an if statement. If we have an ID, update logic here. Else, we'll do our, our create logic, which is done. So if we have an ID, let's do our update logic. If we don't, it's just going to do our create logic that we just have working. So I can go ahead, I'm just going to copy this, throw it here. So let response equal Axios dot. It's not going to be a post. It's going to be, we can do a put request to items /:ID. So we're just going to do a put request to items ID. Oh, actually, I need to actually interpolate the ID. Still, like with a put request, just like a post request, I still want to pass this item that we created up here. So we can still keep this logic the same, build out our item, and then pass it to our put. And then here, we're not going to want to add item though, right? We need to update UI. And we'll say update response.data in items. Let's just, before we update our UI, let's just see if this works. Because we made a couple changes. I need to refresh because I changed my React components. So maybe first of all, I just want to test that I didn't break by doing that if else logic, I didn't break my new form. So let's just create that. Cool. So my new form is still working. So let's go ahead and try to update that test. Bang, 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 just add, I don't know, something, change it. Update. Okay, I don't see any errors, like in my console, I don't see any errors. And also I'm logging the object item form 20. So that looks like it worked. Right, I could also check this just by refreshing. And that I can, by refreshing, that's going to do another GET request. I can now see that, that was updated. But when I do update something, like if I update RAM to bang and click update, it doesn't actually update my UI. So that's what I need to do next. So once again, my state for items lives in my app. I'm going to do a const update item function. That's going to take an item. Maybe I'll do this in like a variable that updated items equal. So I can go through my items. I'm going to map over them. Go through each item. In my items array, I'm going to say, hey, does that item.id, does it equal? So I'm calling this I. So that's going, I is each of is the item that I'm going through in my items array. This item right here, that is the thing that was passed to the item that was passed to my function. This should be the item that's updated. So when I map what I'm going to do, I'm going to check if these IDs match. If they do match, then I want to return the item that was passed to this function. If those IDs, meaning that was the thing that was changed. If they don't match, I just want to return I, which is the item I'm currently iterating over. Like that's an unchanged item, leave that the same. And then I can set items to updated items. Updated. Should have this be like semantically correct. Updated items. And this method's called update item. Cool. So now this updated items function, I need to pass this. This is a really tricky thing. I need to pass this all the way to my item form. I want to call this right here. But this one's a little tricky to pass because I need to pass this through a couple components. So I'm going to call this update item. So my items prop is now going to receive this updated item prop, which the value is going to be this actual function. Okay, so then in my items, I now get an updated item prop. Well, I need to now pass that on down to my item. So now I'm giving an item an updated item prop, which is that updated item prop from app. All right, now in my item component, I can now pull that updated item from props. And now I can finally pass that to my form, update item. And now in my item form, now I can pull that off of props, update item, and yay, now it's defined. So a lot of work there, because what we had to do is, and maybe we can kind of see this in the UI, because that function lives in this component. So I had to pass it the update item. It's defined in this like app component. So I had to pass that down to my items. And then I had to pass that down to my item and down to my form. So I had to pass it through 4 different components. Could also kind of look at it like this. I defined it in my app. See, there's my update item. Or it's not even in here because it's defined in here. Then my items gets that. There's the update item prompt. I pass it to my item, update item, and then I can finally pass that to the form. You might have to like go over that like 10 times and say it out loud. But now when I click update, it updates my UI. And yay. We'll talk about some other ways, you know, in like week 7, how we can avoid having to pass a prop like that. But for now, that's how you're going to do it. And then also, it's once you get your head wrapped around that, it's really going to make you understand props. So it's definitely challenging, but just try to go through that a couple times. But yeah, because the state for our items lives in our app. But we wanted to call that to actually update our item when this button in our item form is called. So yeah, we have to do this weird kind of gymnastics of passing that all the way down to this form. Let's do one other. Let's do a CRUD action. Let's do delete, because we're going to have to do something similar with delete, so we can kind of go through it one more time. Because for delete, what we're going to do is let's just do this at the very bottom. Once again, this is not like going to be pretty, but it's going to work. We're going to, for each of our items, we're going to throw a delete button in here. So now they all have their own delete button. But once again, our item state lives all the way up here. So in our app.js, this is where we're going to like handle that const delete item. This can maybe just take an ID. For now, let's maybe just let me just show you this. So we've been doing, I could do the Axios call here. I could just do all of this work right here. I could make this async. I could do my Axios call, let response equals await Axios dot delete. It's going to be items and then interpolate the ID of the item. Right, that's our call to delete. If we do a delete request to items and then the ID, that should hit our delete method in our controller. So that removes from DB. And then we need to remove from UI. for that, I could just do a set items. I'm going to do this all here just to give you some variety. So here I could just directly call my items.filter. Go through each item. As long as the item.id does not equal the ID that was passed, keep it in our items array. Or keep it in this new array. Maybe that's a little, let's do it. Let's call this filtered items. I could just throw this inside of that function, but let's store it to a variable and then throw that in there. So we create a new array where we go over our current array of items and we just filter out that one item whose ID matches the ID that was given to us. So that would remove it, put it into this new array called filter items, and then we can set items. So now once again, and this is kind of going to be a review of what we did with the update function. So this delete item function lives in our app function. So it lives in here, but we need to pass it down through our items and then into our item component. So when we click this button, we can call it. So let's do that. So in our items, I'm going to pass that a delete item prop, set it equal to that function that we just defined. Okay, then I can command click on my items. So now this is getting a delete item prop, but I don't want to use that here. I want to use that in my item. So I'm going to pass that down to the item. It's kind of like an intermediary step. So then I can go to my item, pull that delete item function off of props. And now on my button, now I can finally use it. I can pass it the ID. But I want to wrap that in a function so it only gets called when the button's clicked. So just to kind of, I'm going to go backwards. So I pull this delete item in. So I'm in my item component. I pull this delete item from props, which I get right here. Item is getting a delete item prop, which is being assigned to this delete item, which is also getting pulled from props in items. Well, where am I getting that? In my app.js, I'm getting this delete item prop defined. What is that? It's this delete item variable, which is the actual function. So that was kind of working the way back up the chain. So now when I refresh, I can now go in, click delete, and that deletes it. And it's also deleting it from my UI. Or it's deleting it from my database and my UI. So we can go delete a whole bunch of these. Oh, actually, I deleted all of them. If I hit refresh, now they're all gone. But that is the CRUD actions. So that's going to be your homework this week. You're going to have the whole weekend to do it. I know this is a lot. This lecture is normally 2 days, so we kind of hurried through it just to get it all done. But now you're going to have today. So today, Wednesday, and then 4 more days. So you have 5 days to kind of go over this. Now you can go, I know it's Thanksgiving break, take a couple days off where you have no code. Give yourself a little break, but definitely use this break though to kind of go through this. I want to talk about one more thing just as like a bonus, and that is the error handling. So let's say I come in and I try to create a new item, that doesn't have a name. So that's going to fail, right? See there, if I try to create an item that does not have a name, I'm getting back my 422. But I'm just seeing that in a console. How could I kind of handle that in the UI? I'm just going to do this a very simplified way of doing this. In my item form, what I can do, and we talked about this a little, is just barely, is I can wrap this code in a try catch block. I can try to do all of this stuff. And if it fails, I can catch an error. So if we do fail, let's just alert error occurred. And then I could console.log error, console.log error.response. Just kind of showing you some stuff here. So I can throw this all in a try catch. So now if I refresh, a new item, don't give it a name, hit create. Oh, that was for my update. I'm gonna do, so that didn't work because that's my update method. So I'll do the same thing with my create. Just wrap this in a try catch block. Go ahead and refresh. Create a new item. Don't give it a name. Hit create. So there I'm getting an alert. That's the alert right here. The alert just pauses your code and pops up this window. Then I log my error, and then I log the error.response. Look at the error.response.data.errors. There's that error, name can't be blank. I'm not going to do it, but I could go in and then I could use that error to put a little message right here. An asterisk like in red saying, hey, name can't be blank. So that's just a little teaser on how we can use these errors to, create our UI to, show what actually went wrong. Error.response.data, what was it? .errors. And that's an array I could pull off the first thing. New app, create, okay. Oh, did I not save that? I didn't save it. Did not log it. Anyway, where is that? Oh, I keep on doing that on the update. Make that blank, update. Cool. There it is. Name can't be blank. So I could use that and do something with that. But that's for another time. Just kind of want to show you kind of that flow of how in our controller, we can render back some JSON, get back the errors, get back a 422. By doing this status 422, that is actually going to cause an error. If we return a status 422, that will cause this to fail, this Axios call, and then that will hit our catch block. And then we can handle that error there. Sweet. Let me push this up to GitHub. Are there any questions? I'm sure there's a lot, but how are you feeling about this?
At least on the pull from GitHub, because I'm going to use everything that you did today kind of as like, to help me baby step me, guide me through it. Other than like seeding and migrating your database, do you need to do anything to actually get the clone that I create to render properly for what I'm pulling from GitHub from this? Because when I created it myself this morning, like mine was working, but then when I tried to pull it from yours, I couldn't get anything to work after I pulled it from yours, from your GitHub.
Yeah, so yeah, what you would want to do. So I just pushed this up to GitHub. So let me find this read. Here it is. Here are the steps. You're going to want to clone. I'm going to rename this since I already have this project. We'll just call this like clone. So I clone that. I need to CD into that. So I clone it. I think if you're trying to like follow along and you're pulling, you might just want to like reclone, start over. But here's kind of the steps. I clone it. I run bundle. Could not locate gem file. Oh, I cloned the wrong thing. That's not the right package. This is from yesterday. So there's no gem file there because that was just a React package. Let's see. This is the right one. So here's what I want to do. Find the right repo. That's an important part of this to clone. I can call this whatever, clone. Yo. Okay. So I clone this project. I can CD into it. So I need to run bundle because I need to get all the gems and the Rails stuff, Ruby stuff. Then I need to do yarn. That gives me like the React, Axios, all of that stuff. This one takes a second. And then I would need to do a Rails DB create. You might even want to do this if you're following along and have already created this project. I think this would help just to drop it, recreate it, remigrate and reseed. I need to quit that. I quit it in time. Okay. If I had that server running, I quit it just in time. It probably would have not dropped it if that was still running. And now, if I wanted to push this up to my own repo as well, I would want to get remote RM origin, just so I'm not pointing to the repo I cloned from, and then add my own, get add remote, new origin here, whatever. That's not going to work, but then I should be able to start my server. And then go to localhost 3000. Did I push up an error? Hopefully that's not still there. Did I have an error?
That's the same error that I was getting when I tried to do all this morning. So I was wondering where that was coming from.
Yeah, Get status. Does this one have it? Did I like Rails S? I thought this was working. Did I just add an error right at the end? Ooh, shame on me. So I have an error. Once again, if I look at my console, I'm getting a 500 error. If you ever see a 500 error, the place to go look to see if you can find a better error is in your server. If we can find it in here, sometimes it will be there, other times it's not. There's the error I'm getting. It's not really helpful. Let's see if there's another one. Sweet. Return outside of a function in my item form. Okay. Did I like do something here when I was adding the, I think I have to have an extra colon. Yep. Yep. I must have accidentally typed in an extra semicolon. Cool. But if I didn't have that error, that probably would have been pretty hard to find. But you know, finding this error that says, hey, it's at least in your item form.js, that really helped. So use your server, see if you can find these errors. So yeah, sorry. Let me go ahead, git add dot git commit shim. Thank you for catching that. Cool. So yeah, let's just try this again. Let's clone this. So I pushed that up. I created a new clone of this. So yeah, I'll run bundle. I'll run yarn. I do want to make sure that it should be working since I just checked that, but let's just be very sure. So I clone it, I run yarn, I run bundle. I could do a Rails DB drop, DB create, DB migrate, DB seed. Do a Rails S. So now I'm running my clone. I mean, all of this information should change, so I should be able to tell this is the clone, but it should still work. There we go. So that is working. Cool. Let me go over the homework with you since I won't be here when we get when we come back from break. And I've already released this in Neo, but here's the homework. It's essentially the exact same thing we did today, except you're going to be doing a books list. Oh wait, this is yesterday's homework. It's still a books list. Where is it? Books. Okay, so you're going to be doing this books, but with Rails. So this is going to be a 2-day, plus assignment. it's going to be due on Monday. So you have technically have 5 days. So you're going to create a Rails React Webpack app EE, create a Rails app with this command. You can choose your name, but you're going to create an app like we did today. And then you're going to have a book model with title and author. So you're going to do all CRUD actions. Like we did today, you're going to do a render app.js component. That's going to be the one component you're going to render server side. And then you're going to use Axios to do all your other CRUD actions. So some bonus objectives: style your app. You could try doing a validation like we did today. You can add more fields to the book via migration. If you really want to try, you can maybe try doing a spinner or like toggle form. So we haven't maybe shown you how to do a loading UI. I've kind of shown you how to do toggle form, but maybe you could try figuring the loading out on your own. But that's a bonus objective. So yeah, and this assignment is really, you could really just follow what we did today in lecture, fairly close. It's pretty much going to be the exact same thing. You can do it the exact same way if you want. You can try doing it a different way, but it's kind of the same principle. Cool. Any questions on that?
I do have like a little technical question on my Postgres,
Uh-huh.
something kind of unrelated with the homework. When I'm trying to pull up the Rails S, it's giving me an error with connection not established.
Yeah, so for that, whenever you see that error, you're going to want to go to your elephant, and it's probably your server's probably not running here. Sometimes that just happens, and you can click that start button and see if you get the green check. You want to see that green check right here.
Okay. I did that, but it still gave me that little X mark, and I tried closing it out and opening it back up again. And it, yeah.
Okay, how about you stay on, because
Okay.
we can look at that. We'll fix that. Does anyone else have any questions? Sweet. If not, have a good Thanksgiving. I'll be on Slack during Thanksgiving if you have any questions on your homework. I would say if you do have questions, I think what would really help me is for me to answer your questions is to have a GitHub going, and so I can go look at your GitHub and I can look at your code there. Because the errors are definitely going to get a little harder to find, the bugs are going to get harder to find. But if I can look at your repository and I can see all your code, that's going to help me. So if you want help over the break, I'll be willing to do it, but you just have to have a GitHub repo and a semi-cleared question. Sound good? Cool. Well, enjoy your break. Have fun. Take some time off, get away from your computer, but also use this break to get caught up. Because I know probably all of you might feel like there's definitely been some holes with this. And this assignment in particular is a lot. So it's a good time to have an extra couple days. Cool. Let's see, Austin, you want to share your screen?
Yeah, I'll do that right now.
I'll try to have this video up sometime tonight so you can have it over the break.